The relations between Russia and NATO have never been as bad as they are today. The war in Ukraine and the reaction of their Western allies have caused tension in Europe like nothing seen since the Cold War. But awareness of the players in the Ukrainian war and Donald Trump's entry onto the scene could change a lot of things in international chess, which begs the question of whether Trump can really make a difference and whether Putin is ready for a new era. Carlos Uriarte Sanchez from the Institute of Debate and Analysis of Security Policies joins us now from Madrid, Spain, to analyze these questions. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for joining us on AnewZ.
Thank you for your invitation to participate in your program. For me, it's a great honor and pleasure.
So I'm starting with the first question. NATO and Russia find themselves locked in a cycle of mutual distrust, heightened by recent events such as NATO's military exercises near Russian borders and Russia's actions in Ukraine. How would you characterize the current state of NATO-Russia relations?
Very bad relations at all. I mean, they have very bad relations. We had in the past this so-called joint council NATO Russia, and they meet regularly. But after the aggression of Russia to Ukraine, then they were not anymore meetings of this joint committee NATO Russia. And this is the situation until now, that there are not official contacts, and NATO is supporting with all its capabilities, but also without being officially involved in the war in Ukraine, but it's supporting technically and logistically to Ukraine. This is clear. And in this regard, we can say that nowadays NATO-Russia relations are not working, and we could say that even there is not relations among both sides.
So the confrontation between NATO and Russia seems rooted in historical grievances and territorial disputes and competing worldviews. What are the key factors driving the ongoing tension between the two parties?
Well, in the past, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was an approach among Russia Federation and NATO. Even they created different gremiums in order to have meetings and to talk each other about a common European security and defense architecture and how to cooperate each other. But after 2004, but especially after the war of Ukraine started soon 3 years ago, then NATO and Russia stopped all kind of cooperation. But in the past, they were cooperation among both sides after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But nowadays, this is not the situation, and we will see what is happened when the crisis in Ukraine will finish, but I'm not so optimistic at all. Even with the Donald Trump administration, I don't see that NATO and Russia could reestablish normal relations in the short time. Maybe in the middle, long time, yes, because we need to talk to Russia. Russia is an important country, it's our neighbor, and it's part of Europe. It means that we need to have a cooperation with Russia, not just in terms of NATO, but also in terms of the European Union. But for that, we need to stop the war, and we need to have a clear discussion, open discussion with Russia, to talk about which future defense and security architecture we could build together, or unless any way of cooperation. Now, important thing is to finish the war in Ukraine. Of course, NATO and European Union is going to continue supporting Ukraine to, in that case of negotiations, Ukraine will be in a good way to negotiate with Russia. And additionally, there are things that are not for Westerns that they are not totally acceptable, because if everything that Russia demands we accept, then for what 3 years, almost 3 years of war? So many people died, so many money invested in this war for nothing, to have only just Russia and its positions. Then we will need to discuss and to find a compromise, taking into consideration that Ukraine was attacked by Russia, and the country who has violated international law was Russia, not Ukraine. And taking into consideration all these things, of course, we'll be able to talk with Russia. We need to talk with Russia. This is something that, but we need to build confidence each other, and again, little by little, create a framework to share trust each other.
So, how has NATO's stance evolved since the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, NATO has supported clearly Ukraine, but of course, officially NATO was not involved in the Ukraine war, because NATO didn't send officially troops on the ground. Um, this is one issue that now is discussing in Europe. If we need to give security guarantees to Ukraine, just in the case that there is a ceasefire, we are thinking in Europe that these troops, they could be European Union troops and not NATO troops, not troops to fight against Russia. No, just after they find an agreement for the ceasefire, European Union troops, they could send to Ukraine just as with the purpose of guarantee Ukraine security guarantees.
So, while dialogue between NATO and Russia has diminished in recent years, some experts suggest that pathways to normalization still exist. So, is there a realistic pathway toward normalizing relations between NATO and Russia?
Of course, we will normalize relations, but not from one day to another. This is the reality. I mean, who can believe that after the war, the same situation is going to be as before? We need to build again confidence and trust. In the short time, we will need to create this adequate atmosphere to trust each other. But we are not going to create the best relation from one day to another. This is in the short time. But of course, little by little, in the medium long term, we need to have a dialogue with Russia. We need to incorporate Russia in the European security and defense architecture in any kind of way, because we are neighbors. We are living in the same continent, even taking into consideration that Russia has an Euroasiatic dimension. But it's European culture, it's part of Europe. Then we will need to talk with Russia, have good relations with Russia when the conditions would be implemented. And because of that, we need confidence and trust each other.
So,
And first of all, finish the war in Ukraine.
So, given the complexity of NATO-Russia dynamics, neutral actors such as certain non-aligned nations or international bodies might facilitate dialogue. What role could a neutral country like Azerbaijan play in facilitating a rapprochement between Russia and NATO?
Well, Azerbaijan is a very interesting country. It's in a crossroad among Europe and Asia. Azerbaijan was the Soviet time part of the Soviet Union after the collapse of the Soviet Union, without taking into consideration the short period of the First Republic of Azerbaijan after the First World War. But when we talk about the nowadays Azerbaijan after the collapse of the Soviet Union with the leadership of President Haidar Aliyev, with this great nation, with good relations with Turkey, we must remember one people, two states, but as well at the same time, good and strong links with Russia. Of course, Azerbaijan could play a mediator role. Also, Azerbaijan has good relations with the European Union, as well with the United States of America. And I know very well Azerbaijan, and I know that they have a strong potential having this multi-vectorial foreign affairs policy that they are trying to keep also as member of the non-alignment movement. In this regard, I think that the role of Azerbaijan could be crucial. Turkey is member of NATO, and which are the other with Iran, Western countries, they don't have the best relation. Then which actor in the area could also be a mediator in the issue of Ukraine, not just in the issue of the Ukraine, but also in the Middle East? Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has a very nice relations with Israel. It means I'm totally in favor that Azerbaijan should take more responsibility as a medium power, not just the South Caucasus or in the Middle East, also with this peaceful and inter-religious and inclusive policy that Azerbaijan has, could be also a good example as mediator for the rest of the world. And in this case, we have two big issues in Ukraine, but as well in the Middle East. And there, I think that Azerbaijan could play a good mediation role as mediator.
So as Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev pointed out, a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO would be a global apocalypse. Do you think we are close to such a scenario?
I don't think so. That in the end, now we have a new president in the United States, which is a very transactional, negotiate everything. As well, I mean, in the crisis of the Middle East, the winner for sure, and in the collapse of Syria, the winner has been, without any doubt, Turkey. But anyhow, I think that now is not time to continue with these wars. It means Al-Assad regime has fallen down. Turkey has won already positions in the Middle East as power. Israel has won as well. Russia and Iran, they have lost. We didn't any more revisionism, and now we need to finish the crisis in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Syria, keeping stability in the Middle East, and finish the war in Ukraine, but of course, taking into consideration what the international law says. It means it's not the same the victim that the attackant. We cannot put both states at the same level. Ukraine has suffered an attack from Russia. We are not going to see what was first if the egg of the chicken. This is, or we cannot go again to the history and move these borders again in Europe and be revisionisms. I mean, now we need to think in what the rule of law means and international law. And this is what we need to fulfill. Because imagine in Europe, how many wars we have had. First World War, Second World War, how many borders they have changed. If we will start now with this revisionism, the European Union wouldn't be success as we have now a successful bloc also that can have a positive mission for the whole world as a good proposal and also as mediator and also as a bloc of peace.
So, Mr. Uriarte Sanchez, Donald Trump's previous tenure was marked by controversial statements on NATO and a seemingly less confrontational approach to Russia. If Donald Trump returns to the White House, how might his foreign policy impact NATO-Russia relations?
Well, first of all, there is one Trump. The first Donald Trump, we know from the first Donald Trump administration. After that, we have a second Donald Trump, which was the Donald Trump in the last campaign. We know what he said, that he will finish the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Mm-hmm. After he won the elections, Trump has not spoken so much about the war in Ukraine. We don't know what he's going to do in reality. One thing is what he said during the campaign, and after that, the reality when he's going to take the power on January 20th, 2025. What we know is that in the first administration, the situation was different. Mm-hmm. Now in the new Trump administration, the second administration, we have a war in Ukraine. Before, in the first administration, this was not the case.
That was Professor Carlos Uriarte Sanchez from the Institute of Debate and Analysis of Security Policies in Spain. Thank you for joining us and keep watching AnewZ.